House Oversight Committee will investigate the use of reproductive health data collected by technology firms. 3 Democratic lawmakers sent letters to a handful of data companies requesting a lot of documents and information on their data security practices. Let me read you part of this letter. Quote, "The collection of the sensitive data could pose serious threats to those seeking reproductive care, as well as to providers of such care, not only by facilitating intrusive government surveillance, but also by putting people at risk of harassment, intimidation, and even violence." Joining me now is one of the authors of that letter, Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, a Democrat from Illinois. Congressman, thanks very much for the time. I read through the letter this morning, and you guys seem very worried, given the history of a lot of big tech companies with handling private data. But also, your concern seems to really center on the sharing of the data gathered by these apps with big third-party tech companies. So I'm interested in what specifically you think needs to change to protect it. What specific changes are you guys calling for?
Well, first of all, we're trying to shed sunlight on the privacy policies of these different apps. As you know, millions of women entrust deeply personal reproductive health data with these apps and the companies that manage them. And so we're trying to find out what are their policies with regard to sharing this information, who has actually accessed it, and what are their policies going forward after now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned. Separately, we've initiated legislation to put more privacy protections in place with regard to this information.
Okay. The White House has warned about some of these apps, not all of them, but saying people need to be, and I quote, really careful when using, for example, a period tracker app. I mean, that's saying a lot coming from the White House. Is your assessment at this point that these apps are safe to use at the moment?
Not all of them, Poppy. It appears that many of them actually share information without the consent of the women or others who are using those apps. And so we are trying to shed sunlight on those policies and exactly which companies are doing what, so that women can actually make better informed decisions in the marketplace, even at the same time that we're pursuing legislation to provide privacy protection for everybody.
President Biden, as you know, signed an executive order on Friday trying to protect abortion rights, but there are some, not just activists, but some in Congress, including the Congressional Progressive Caucus, who tweeted out, "It's a start, but it's not enough." I wonder if you agree with them.
I think we need to do more. I think that, quite frankly, in Congress this week, we're taking up 2 bills. One to protect those women who are traveling from states where abortions are outlawed to other states such as Illinois, where they can get reproductive health services. We also need to codify Roe. Of course, we'll be taking up another bill to do that this week. But in the Senate, unfortunately, there's a filibuster in place with regard to that legislation, which means that we have to get more senators elected to potentially create a carve-out within the filibuster to allow for Roe v. Wade to be codified.
So, Congressman, I'd like to turn to talk about guns and red flag laws, given the tragedy in your state, the Highland Park mass shooting, the tragic number of shooting deaths in Chicago as well. Illinois has red flag laws, but it didn't work in the Highland Park case. We now know a lot about all of the missed warning signs, the numerous times police were called to the home of the shooter, the parents' unwillingness to raise a red flag, if you will, and the way that the red flag law is written in your state is that family members have to raise it. For example, police can't initiate it. And I wonder if you think the text of the law now needs to change.
Yes, and I think that's what the governor and the General Assembly here are planning to do, Poppy, in the upcoming special session. But more lives of 7 people used a Smith & Wesson M&P 15 semi-automatic weapon. Used a Smith & Wesson 15 semi-automatic weapon. The M&P stands for military and police. This weapon, we allow such weapons of war to be accessible by people like this person, Mr. Cremo, the shooter, or anyone. I think the answer is no, because unfortunately these AR-15 and other
I'd like to ask you more broadly about Chicago. You called the Highland Park mass shooting unspeakable, and it is. 7 murdered, the 8-year-old little boy paralyzed, dozens in. You had 71 people shot. They're higher from guns. JR, who's a resident of the south side of Chicago, told the Washington Post, quote, "We are getting ignored. Kids get shot here, they throw them in bags, and they keep going, but they got the whole SWAT team out there in Highland Park trying to get to the bottom of this." I promise you he's not alone, and I wonder what you say to him.
I think he's right. I think we have to bring more attention to the daily unfortunate mass shootings that are happening in places like Chicago and elsewhere. But that's going to require federal gun regulations, Poppy. In Chicago, for instance, 60% of crime guns, those are guns found at crime scenes, are actually coming from other states like Indiana, Wisconsin, and other places where the regulations are so lax with regard to these weapons. So only national common sense gun control can prevent these tragedies that are unfortunately unfolding every day in places like Chicago and other cities.
Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, thanks for your time on both of these really important issues this morning.
Thank you, Poppy.